All right, it's 8 p.m. here in Sydney time, and thank you so much for joining. My first question is if you can hear me okay. So I just put up a quick poll if the sound is coming through clearly. If you would be so kind to answer the poll, is the sound coming in clearly? All right, so we are ready to start. So first, welcome to the second webinar in December, the second to last one for this year. So there will only be a webinar next week on the 17th of December, and then that's the Christmas break and New Year's break, and then I'll see you again in January. So if this is your first time in Zoho Showtime, you can ask questions over here. So if you have a question, don't be shy, just ask the question over there. There's a little red arrow there for questions. I get to see those questions and answer them, and they will, you will be treated confidentially because this is recorded. If there is a poll, you will see the poll shine up. But if you want to take notes, you can do that straight away from the application. And don't exit the browser straight away when the webinar is done. Remember to send the notes to you, and they will be emailed to you in a text document. All right. And finally, if you want to go back to a slide, you see a slide trail on the right-hand side, and you can go back to the slide here where the presenter is where I'm currently talking to. But if you want to go back a couple of slides, you can do that as well. All right. Let's get started. So we're talking about Agile for everyone or anyone. And whether you're a Scrum Master or you are new to Agile delivery and it's the first time you look at it, or you just always wondered, like, what is this all about? This webinar is for you. So we're going to cover a lot of detail. We do it very fast. At the end of the webinar, I will also send you a recording so you can go over it through it again. A little bit about me. I've been in business applications for over 25 years. I've worked with the top tier ERP and CRM systems like Baan, Siebel, Dynamics. I worked for both large and small vendors and system integrators like Capgemini New Zealand, CGNZ, HSO, HP, Microsoft, and currently I am a Zoho partner. Everything I do is with Zoho. So there's no other software that I'm doing at the moment. This webinar applies to any implementation you do. So it's not web to Zoho, but I would recommend you looking at Zoho Sprints to manage your Agile. And the key thing I want you to take away today is you either plan everything in advance or you deliver small increments and adjust often. You just can't do both. Where I see a lot of projects go astray that go in the Agile methodology is, yeah, we want to be Agile, but I want to control everything that's going on here. I want to be fully in control. I want to know everything that's going to happen. That's incompatible, right? So you got to let go of the conception that you know everything in advance. And during this webinar, we'll come through, okay, why that actually is. So first of all, what is Agile delivery anyway? And before we go into the whole methods of Agile and how you can do it, I'm using Scrum, by the way, is it's fail fast, fail often. And what that means is we know that things are going to go different than we thought they would because we're doing something that we've never done before. But if you do it fast and often, it's easier to change tack. So instead of shooting the cannonball and hoping it will land on the ship and it's your last cannonball, you shoot some tracer bullets first, then you aim, and then you can shoot the cannonball. So that's kind of the whole thing here is fail fast, fail often, and adjust. You focus in Agile on delivery, not so much the documents. And that comes back to the original quote, or the premise is you don't want to know everything in advance. You don't know everything in advance. So you go little steps forward into the direction you want to go to. Every release that we do is a minimum viable product, and that's a product that's somehow usable. So somehow usable. It's not perfect. We're not going for gold-plated, but it is a usable product that we can actually work with. And then finally, it is small and contained teams. So the team size that is most productive in Agile is roughly between 5-7 people. Don't go over 9. because things become very difficult to manage. And what comes into mind here is Derek de Solla Price. He puts forward Price's law. The square root of the number of people involved in an enterprise deliver half the work. So the larger your team, the more people actually do less. So that's good to keep in mind. Also with agile delivery, keep your teams small. So why do we do agile? And now going from an agile perspective, the waterfall method, the traditional method of a project where we do one thing and then the next one and then the next one, and there's all these dependent tasks, it's built to fail late and slowly. Usually you find out at the later stages of the project, like, whoops, the budget ran out, but we still have scope left. So the agile people will say like, well, we could have solved that, etc. Be careful. Agile is not a solution for everything. If the scope is simply too big to deliver in a certain time frame with certain resources, it doesn't matter what methodology you use, whether it's agile or a traditional waterfall. Okay. Now, with a waterfall method, you also have more overhead because you have a larger plan that tends to look at everything in advance, lots of dependencies. Therefore, you have to manage a lot of moving components in the team, and therefore, you need a larger project management office. The other thing with waterfall is we tend to put all the nice to haves in there as well, which is gold plated solutions, and therefore you got a larger project budget that's required. Now, if you don't have the budget, what then happens is we take away those gold-plated things, and then you have the bare-bones systems at the end of the whole program. And then finally, complex dependencies, as I just mentioned, and large teams. Right now, with complexity it's easy to increase complexity. It's not easy to simplify. So, from the waterfall delivery. The reason why we go for agile is the waterfall delivery tends to introduce more complexity. That said, there is a case for it because there are plenty of projects where agile just would not fit. And here it goes. So what type of project can be delivered with agile? As I said, not everything can be. So first of all, you need to be able to deliver in iterations. And what you'll hear a lot with agile is MVP and MVI, minimum viable product, which is a minimum viable product that I can use, and a minimum viable increment, which is a minimum viable improvement on that product. So no half products there. So if you can't deliver a minimum viable product in an iteration, usually agile is a bit challenging. Although it could be a small iteration, small product, right? If you have too many constraints, either legal or technical constraints or etc., then agile may not be the right way to go. I wouldn't be building a rocket ship to Mars using agile and very little documentation because there's too many constraints. We need to get people there to the planet alive and back. There's a lot of constraints there. So agile may not be the right way to go for such a large undertaking. You need to do it with waterfall. Finally is if you have flexibility and products, you can use agile because you don't exactly know what it is. Again, we're building on minimum viable product and then add stuff to it. And we come back to that a little bit later in this webinar as well. So the flexibility with the end product, if you have no flexibility, agile is not going to help you. You're probably better off with waterfall. But if you do have a lot of flexibility, in other words, that you kind of know what the core of the product is, but you don't know what the end state is going to be exactly, agile will be great. And by the way, product doesn't have to be a physical product. It can also be a software implementation. It could be many things, right? The product is just the end result of the program that you run through. I see a question come up. Okay, a lot of waterfall products are fixed price. Can you do a fixed price with agile? Okay, so the question is, can I have a fixed price program with agile? The answer is yes and no. So yes, you can fix the budget, right? Because and we come to that later on how the sprints work. But you don't know exactly what you're going to deliver. You know that there will be a minimum viable product at the end of the sprint, and maybe some more stuff. And you know that there will be sprints after that. What you don't know is how many sprints do you want to get the final product that you're satisfied with. So it's easy to fix the budget, but with agile you kind of keep the scope variable. We come to that on how to manage that risk. All right. So the Scrum team, I told you I'm kind of a fan of Scrum, and if you haven't read the book, I believe it's Jeff Sutherland. The book is called Scrum: How to Do Twice the Work in Half the Time. Brilliant book, gives brilliant examples, very, very good read. Doesn't only apply to software implementation, it applies to many, many ways of implementing stuff or building stuff. And what is a Scrum team? It's very simple. There are actually 3 roles. There's a product owner, and typically they represent in business applications the business. They write and own the user stories. Now, if you've seen my previous webinar, AAA user stories. The team member, they are delivering against that user story. So either building the software or building the machine or whatever it is. They estimate the effort and deliver the work. And then the Scrum Master coordinates between those and removes obstacles. So there's actually no formal project manager. There's also not really a formal project. So it's very much a self-managed team. Very small, very simple. Obviously, team members can have specialities, and product owners will represent different areas of the business. So you have multiple of those. Right. So why would we cut up a project into smaller pieces? So in my history, I used to do very, very large projects, like $100 million transformation programs. The problem with it is we call them too big to fail. So we manage all the risk up front because this is huge risk we're taking. So we manage it all up front, right? We do analysis, we do the diagnostic phase, right? Big documents and risk analysis, etc. So what could possibly go wrong? And the next thing is, well, we are pretty confident to start. We thought of everything. In other words, we went through a whole phase of analysis paralysis, right? We overanalyze everything. And what we know from reality is that reality refuses to be put into a risk model. Things can just happen, and there you go. And the final thing is we have great governance. So with a waterfall project, you need to have a proper governance structure in place, which I think is good for Agile as well, except that it sits more on the usability of the product instead of the program itself. In large programs, the traditional waterfalls, you could create a monster of no progress, which means status reports upon status reports, meetings upon meetings, your failure estimations, etc., that are going in there, your Six Sigmas, etc., but no one is actually delivering any work. So be careful. And that's also where the solid prices law comes in. The square root of all people deliver half the work. And with the work, I mean the actual productive work. Everyone else is busy. Only so many people work on the product. So with Agile, we try to say, you know what? Such projects are too big to succeed. You can't manage the risk up front. You cannot think of everything. And yeah, you can have great governance, but you're probably not making the progress. So that's the whole premise behind Agile. And again, if it fits your program to do waterfall, keep doing waterfall. Be aware that you want to keep those things a little bit in containment. But if Agile fits, I would definitely recommend fail fast, fail often, and adjust. So we mentioned minimum viable product. Just write in the comments in the question here, what do you think of this as a minimum viable product iteration? Is this a proper strategy? Oh, don't be shy, just write it in the questions. Right. No, that's correct. It isn't a minimum viable product because not every part is usable. So if you go for a minimum viable product, you got to be able to use it. The first one, just a wheel, what are you going to do with that? The second part is the undercarriage of the car. Great, not usable. The backside of the car, also fantastic, but only from picture number 4, can you do something with it? Does it serve a purpose? So we go now to the second option. How about this? Are these minimum viable products and iterations? See some people saying yes. All right. Actually, they are minimum viable products, but from an iteration perspective, look at the pictures 1, 2, 3, and 4. How many components can you reuse and build upon it? So it may be a minimum viable product in each of the steps, but they're actually not iterations. They're separate products. So we throw away most of the parts from point number 1 to point number 2. We can throw away most of the parts and start again. So for minimum viable product, yeah, point one is correct and point two is a minimum viable product, but they're not minimum viable iterations of each other. So when you do Agile, try to make them iterative and reuse as much as you can. You can't always reuse everything. Be aware of that. So if I have here your minimum viable product, the first one is a car that you can push around. Yeah, no one said it had to be a great product, but it's viable. You can put stuff in there and it moves. The second one is like a pickup truck, but with an engine in it. The third one becomes a sedan model, and the fourth one a slightly altered one. So you reuse a lot of the parts and keep iterating and keep making it slightly better. This is your minimum viable product strategy, minimum viable iteration. Not every part will be reused, but you reuse most of the thing. In this case, the whole foundation, the wheels and the undercarriage, they go through the entire thing. So probably as soon as the engine is in, that it will be into 2, 3, and 4. All right, is that clear? Right. So here is your minimum viable product. So when you plan your agile product delivery, think about how much can I reuse. So number one, can I use it? Number two, how many components can I reuse versus what do I have to throw away? You're looking for practical outcomes and usable attributes in your minimum viable product and minimum viable iteration. Now, I mentioned it before. If you've seen the webinar, Determine the Need of Your Business Applications, you know this. If you haven't seen that one, it is published on my webinar portal, so you can still access that one. AAA user stories. And I put a little picture of the Hollywood Clipper there because a AAA user story's got an actor, someone who wants to achieve something, an action, the task that needs to be achieved that leads to the outcome, and the actual achievement, the result of the task. Now, be aware when you write down your user stories that the actor and action are tactical. In other words, they can be changed. What used to be done by one particular role in your organization before you introduce a new software could easily be done by someone else after the introduction of the software, right? That's not fixed. Same as with the action. There's more ways leading to Rome. So if you're very specific with the action, this is the action we take, but now you put in new software, the action may be different. The same thing is, let's take another example. If I drive my car from A to B, the action is I drive, I get my car from A to B, and the outcome is I'm at B. Now, if I change the actor to the Uber, so the Uber driver drives me from A to B. So I change the actor, the action is still the same. If I change it to public transport, I got the bus driver and the train driver, so two different actors, and the action is they drive me to a location near A and B, and then the rest I have to walk, right? So those things you can interchange. The actions are tactical, the actors are tactical. The achievement, however, is strategic. If I don't end up at B, I have failed the achievement. I failed to deliver the product. So look at it from that way. If you're writing down your business needs, the actor and the action can be interchanged, but the achievement is strategic. Does that make sense? Now we're getting a little bit into, okay, so I got my user stories. How do I estimate these things? And one of the premises of Scrum is that we're very bad at estimating. So human beings are very bad at estimating how big something is or how small. What we're very good at is saying, that's bigger than that one. So what we do with estimation in Agile, especially if we really don't know anything about the timing, is we give it points, relative complexity points. And we call it estimation power. So what we say is this thing compared to the other thing twice as hard to do or not, right? And we call it estimation power. So you sit around the table and everybody puts in what they think how complex this is, and then you just average it out, and then you come to a particular answer. We'll do some challenge with this one here as well to make it more clear, because this is very abstract, right? But it's going with the law of the crowd wisdom, okay? And what you need to do is, if the task is very large, let's say for instance I want to build a rocket ship that goes to Mars, that's a very large task and I can't estimate it. So what you do is you divide it into smaller tasks. and smaller tasks, up to a point where you say, yep, we're comfortable estimating this. So break down the large bits into smaller bits and estimate the smaller bits. Each of these smaller bits, they're estimated based on the people that are going to deliver it. And then you can do the estimation poker. A little bit like, okay, person 1 thinks it's a 1, person 2 thinks it's a 5. You put them two together, that's 6 divided by 2 is 3. Right? That's estimation poker. And don't worry, you don't have to be totally clear what it is, because we're just doing relative estimation at this stage, particularly if it's something that you do not know how to estimate yet. You've never done it before. Right? I haven't built a rocket ship to Mars. I wouldn't know where to start. So if I start making an estimation, well, I would go like, okay, fabricating an O-ring is probably a lot simpler than calculating the trajectory, right? So that's my relative estimation here. That's how you should look at it as well. Now this is important. Those that do the work estimate the work. So the Scrum Master doesn't talk to you around, okay, you need to lower your estimates or anything. The business owner can't talk around that one either. Those who actually perform the work, they estimate the work. And nobody else. And this is very important, that nobody else. So if you're estimating the work as a team, you're accountable for that estimate. If someone else says to you like, hey, we're going to do it slightly less work because we don't have the budget, the team loses the accountability. Okay, so this is very much key in Agile. Those that do the work estimate the work. Let's go for a little bit of how it works, the estimation. So as I mentioned, we estimate relative complexity. We say A is more complex than B, but we don't know exactly what that means. I mean, is A an hour and B 10 hours? We don't know. We don't know if it's hours, seconds, or minutes. But what we know is that A is more complex than B. Okay, so we can use either an integer sequence like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all the way to how far you want to go. The most commonly used in estimating Scrum approach is the Fibonacci sequence. If you don't know what a Fibonacci sequence is, it's down here. That's 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21, 34, etc. And basically, what you see the red circle around the 0 and the 1. Add those two together, that becomes the next line in the sequence. So let's go to another line here. If I add 5 and 8, I get 13. So that's how the Fibonacci sequence works. It's a very simple mathematical sequence, but it's great for estimating relative complexity because the steps get bigger and bigger. Now, my recommendation is if you got a task that is estimated at more than a 34, you probably want to split it up. Okay, so if it's becoming after 34, that's 34, 21, 55. You probably want to split it up into 2 tasks, or maybe 3 or 4. The things that you are more comfortable estimating. So don't put a giant lump with 1,000 points in there. It's not going to work, right? It's just too big a lump. Okay? So let's do an example. Let's play some poker. So there, in the first example that I give, Carl, Claire, and Mark have to deliver something. Carl says, that's easy. That's a 1. And Claire says, well, I think it's a bit harder than that. It's a 2. And then Mark says, well, sorry, I think it's a 3. We miss out all the other things, right? So what we then do is we take the average. We round it to the nearest number in the sequence. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. 6 divided by 3, because we've got 3 people estimating, is 2. 2 is on the sequence, right? So the estimate that goes in, estimation points, is 2. So that's going to be in the whole thing. And again, we don't have to be accurate as such that, is it a 2 or a 3? It doesn't matter, because these are just relative complexities, and at the end of the sprint, we'll actually assign how much time it really took. Okay? So now let's go with your turn here. So Carl estimates the task is 8, Claire at 13, Mark at 5, and a new person, Jessie, she comes in and says, no, it's a 13 as well. I agree with Claire. So how would you go about it, and what would be the answer? All right, let's just see. So we get the answers here is 8, 9.75, 10, or 13. And if you're just thinking like, okay, too much calculation, just think what it is. Just estimate this. What do you think is the closest one? Just hit the answers on the poll. All right, the first answers are coming in. 10 seconds more. And again, if you're not entirely clear, just pick one that feels right. So again, we have, and by the way, all four of them together, so Carl is 8, Claire is 13, Mark is 5, Jesse is 13. Divide them, to add them all together is 39. 39 over 4 people. All right, I'm working here with the most clever people on the webinar. Okay, let's just go for the results. So let's break it down. So, Carl estimates the task as 8, Claire is 13, Mark is 5, and Jesse is 13. So we know that 8 plus 13 plus 5 plus another 13 equals 39. So we take the average. 39 divided by 4 is 9.75. 9.75 is not on the sequence because they're all entire numbers. So let's look at the sequence here. So we got 8, and then we have 13, right? So because before 8 was 5. 5 plus 8 equals 13. So 9.75 is nearer to 8 than 13. And I'm happy to mention we got very smart people here that are probably very used to estimating. 8 is the correct answer. So this is very clear, right? And this is how estimation poker works. You always stick to the sequence. If you use the Fibonacci sequence, we don't want to see anything that is not on the Fibonacci sequence. Okay? Again, these are not hours, days, or minutes. These are relative complexities. At the end of a sprint, you logged how much time you really spent on it. That's when you start getting cleverer and cleverer with your estimation. This is why it's fail fast, fail often, and adjust. All right. In the last webinar, we talked about the unforgettable Moscow. So I'm hoping if you did join, Moscow is unforgettable. Must have, should have, could have, and won't have yet. Now here is where we go back into, and it was an excellent question, can I do fixed price for Agile? And I said, well, you can do a fixed budget, but you don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be. But if you're saying, well, you know what, I really want to have my must-haves, which is your components of the minimum viable product. So if it's a car, it's got wheels, steering wheel, airbags, everything is mandatory for legislation as well as to make it a car and drive it. But nowhere does it say that it has to have a particular paint, right? So all the minimum viable product things, they are must-haves. The rest becomes should-haves and could-haves, okay? If you want to load the sprint with Moscow, and a very risk-averse way of doing it is saying, okay, every sprint I do, and a sprint is delivering a minimum viable product. And once that's delivered, you do the next sprint, minimum viable increment, okay? Is loaded with 65% of the estimation points as must-have. So that means you still have 35% of the estimation points that you can sacrifice, that you say, you know what, we ran out of time, but you still have a minimum viable product. So 35% is actually your risk change. When you start delivering against that 35%, great. You know, whatever you can do, that's fantastic. But if the time runs out, it's a particularly high chance, like 2/3 almost, right, that you're going to have a minimum viable product plus a little bit extra at the end. Now the should-haves and could-haves, I put them here as 25% and 5%. Whatever makes sense, just divide them. It's a 35%, actually I did the math wrong, so it should be 30 and 5%, but anyway, just add them up to 100% and do the math better than I did. See, people can't estimate, I can't. I'm glad to be working with you guys that are obviously a lot smarter than me. Is add them all up, and if you don't make the last 30%, but you make the last, you make only 10% of the should-haves, fantastic, because you get a minimum viable product plus something extra. So you're actually already over-delivering. Now, you could say, like, I want to manage the budget a little bit more tightly, and I think the risk is a bit low on the must-have, so the minimum viable product. Increase it to 75%. Take as much risk as you can. But one thing I can definitely say is do not exceed 80-85%. Right? 15% risk on a project contingency is not a lot. That's actually very little. There's very little that has to go wrong for you not to make your minimum viable product. So I would not go beyond 80%, 85% if you're really certain you know what you're doing, because even then things can go wrong, right? We all know how that goes. So that's how you manage your risk in an agile project. So it's not about documenting everything up front. It's loading your risk profile with, well, I'm going to do maximum 65% must have, so I have 35% to play with. The other way to do it is, okay, I know how the must-haves go. I'm going to load it at 80%. Probably going to finish that, and then 20% will just be extra, the icing on the cake or the cherry on the top. Does it make sense? Okay. Now, what is a sprint and how do I divide it? So what I said before is a sprint is a minimum viable product, but there's also in the sprint is, and that's why we call it a sprint, it's a fixed length. So if you do in the Olympics a 100-meter dash, it's always 100 meters, right? It's not for one person 100 meters and the next time it's 150 meters. It's always 100 meters. Your sprints will always be the same size in duration. So whether that is a 4-week sprint or a 2-week sprint, it doesn't matter. I wouldn't go beyond the 6 weeks. Because then the sprints tend to get longer and they get more complex. So if you can avoid going beyond the 6 weeks, that would be great. Some tools allows you to go to a sprint beyond 6 months. I would not recommend that, right? A 4-week sprint for most software delivery or business application delivery is fine. It's compact enough. If it's more complex, then make it 6 weeks. That's also fine. Now, in a 4-week sprint, what you do is 3 weeks of delivery. That is actually moving the thing. So literally your Kanban board, right? And you see it a lot in those agile projects. You have a board with sticky notes on it. My recommendation is keep that digital because sticky notes tend to fall down. Digital, you can also work with a distributed team. And this screenshot here is from the most excellent Zoho sprint. So if you want to know more about that, then please give me a call. You pick them up and move them into progress and you assign it and therefore assign it to yourself. That means that everybody else knows what you're working on. We can calculate the work in progress, etc. And that's what we do for 3 weeks. We move everything from work in progress, from to do to work in progress to testing to done. And when it's done, it's done. Okay, so that's your component for that minimum viable product is delivered. That's what we do for 3 weeks. And in those 3 weeks, your product owner needs to be testing things. Okay, so it's very collaborative. It's delivering, testing, feedback, etc. At the end of the 3 weeks, it's a 4-week sprint. At the end of the 3 weeks, there's a 1 week of stabilization and planning. So what that means is no more new items, no new requirements. Everything that failed in the test by the by the product owner, that's going to get logged as a bug and added into the stabilization sprint. So that means the team will be fixing those bugs. So for instance, you had a car with square wheels. The product owner goes like, well, it drives a bit wobbly. I'm not really happy with that. That's a bug. Goes back, goes into the grinder, make it a round wheel, right? So that's what happens in week number 4, fixing the bug. So that is done by the team. The replanning for upcoming sprints is done by the product owner and the scrum master. So what happens is at the end of the sprint, whatever is left over, they just either disappear, but they go actually back on the backlog. And they can go into either the next sprint or the ones after that, or they go like, well, you know what, we're going to forget about it. So that's between the product owner and the scrum master, assigning sprint number 2 or number 3, etc. Right? Any bugs that are not able to fix in that 1 week in the stabilization, they go into the next sprint as well. Okay? And what we try to do is make the sprints in roughly the equal number of estimation points. So this is where the estimation points come in. If you got a 3-week sprint with 4 people working on it, and you can deliver 50 estimation points, then the next sprint should also be 50 estimation points. Right? Because then you have a stable delivery. Is there any questions on that? Okay, I see. Actually, yeah. So the estimation points, so here's a question like, how do I actually then manage the time for it? So because we have only relative complexity. What you do is you, at the end of the sprint, you go in and you obviously log your timesheet against the task. and you check, hey, that number 1 here, we spent an hour on that. The number 5, we spent 6 hours on that, right? So you start making, and then you come to an average. Okay, each point is so much work, and these points were underestimated. It was more complex, and it was actually less complex, etc. So you actually do an evaluation of how well you estimated. And I would think in the first iteration, which I call sprint 0, because we don't know anything, that's when you make the most changes to your estimation of complexity. And the more sprints you do, the better you get at, 1, estimating relative complexity, but number 2, assigning approximate times to those, if that makes sense. So it's you learn as a team. Okay. So bringing it all together, it is a fail fast, fail often allows you to adjust early. And this is important, right? So failure is typically seen as like, oh, this is a difficult discussion. Within the Scrum methodology, and that's why we have the daily stand-up. The daily stand-up, I didn't cover it here because we're more talking around the start and how you manage it, but the daily stand-up is you stand up with the whole team, and it's called a stand-up because there are no chairs. It should not last more than 10 to 15 minutes. Where the team says, okay, this is what I'm working on. Here is where I need help. Or this is just difficult, or it's more difficult than I thought. So they're already going in there like saying, hey, I'm stuck, I need help. Whereas in traditional project, you kind of want to just keep going on and figuring out how it works, and you can ask for help or not. But your project status meeting is at the end of the week or in 2 weeks. The project team meeting is weekly, and it's just all planned differently. Within the Scrum methodology, because you have the fail fast, fail often principle, you have to discuss every single day. It's only 10 to 15 minutes. What are you working on? Where do you need help? And particularly the where you need help is where people come together and say, hey, you know what? I'm stuck with this here. I'm stuck with, getting the mailing list details out of the CRM system for my campaigns. That's when the CRM expert comes in and say, hey, you know what? I actually know how to do it. I can help you with that, right? So it's a fail fast, fail often, adjust early. And if the CRM expert says, well, you know what? You can't do it this way. We need to have a different set of segmentation data in CRM. That's when you can then make that adjustment. So the daily stand-up is super important. The second thing is the small self-managed teams are more productive. It's a small team, as I said, maximum 9, but most effective is 5 to 7 people. Delivering the stuff, right? They're more effective and productive than a team of 60 or 70. Now, you can do with a team of 60 or 70, you can do huge projects, but the productivity per person, just kind of think a little sip of water. So the productivity per person that you're going to have in that sprint, in that project, is going to be much lower if you have a huge team, because you have then people managing it, people managing the dependencies. You got your steering committee, you got your architecture committee, and etc. etc. So it tends to grow larger if you have a larger team, because you want to keep everybody at the same side. Now, if you're running on a smaller team, then everybody needs to be focused on what we're doing. Okay. Now, finally, those that do the work estimate the work, nobody else, and sprints are in fixed duration, variable in scope. Right, so this is where your fixed fee delivery versus your non-fixed fee delivery comes in. They're fixed duration, variable in scope. Now you can say, like, my budget is $100,000. Okay, I want to have minimum viable products of that. You calculate the scope. Yep, it will fit. Let's say the minimum viable product in total at the end of all the sprints is, let's say, $65,000. So you get 65% of that thing, but you obviously want to have a little bit nicer, right? So go back to the car. It's great. It's got seats and seat belts. It's better if the seats are nice and soft, and that there's a stereo in the car and probably some paint at the outside of it, so it looks a little bit decent, right? So that's how you calculate that. Now, if you make then your sprints in a fixed duration, and you say, you know what, I'm going to have 5 sprints, right? Each sprint will be then $20,000 in a $100,000 program. Because your sprint loading of the team, you try to keep as much stable as well. The sprint duration is stable. What you don't know at the end of the whole program or the end of each sprint, you know you're going to get the minimum viable product. What you do not know yet is how much of that minimum viable product plus the extra bits. That's the variable part in the scope. So it's a great way of managing the budget, but you can't fix everything because you want to fix everything. Everything becomes a must-have. You can't run Agile. Right. Okay. Well, we've gone through a lot in this webinar. There's really a lot of information in here, so I do invite you to look into the webinar.aurelian-group.com, right? Or just go to the website and check on the publications. I publish these webinars, I publish the recordings, and you can run them through at your own leisure. And feel free to reach out to me if you need any help or advice on how to run your Agile project, or if you want to start one, or if you just want to run a workshop on how to get this done. Do read and sign up on our blog. I write a lot about Agile. I write a lot about Zoho products. And also, if you're not a Zoho customer yet, and I see most of you are, and there's some people from Zoho on the call, you can try the full suite of apps for free for 30 days, which is Zoho One. And after that, it's available for Australian $50. I think it's British pounds, 30 British pounds, and if I'm not mistaken, 30 US dollars as well. But you know, I could don't be hold me to that. But if you want to try it, it's again 1 month. Try the full suite. It is absolutely brilliant. So I hope to see you next week. Next week, 17th of December, we're going to be talking about sales management for any size business. Same time. And it will be the last webinar of the year. So thank you so much for joining us today. The recording will be sent to you as well. Have a great remainder of your day.